As for today's lesson, we are going to go over the SMILE strategy for poetry. It has to do with looking at the structure and the meaning and the way language is used when reading poetry. So have paper and pencil ready and we will get started. So today we're going to explore poetry analysis. To do this, we need to follow some simple steps. First, I want you to read the poem for enjoyment. Don't get hung up on overthinking or looking for too much. Just read it all together as it was intended to be read for enjoyment. And then second, then we're going to reread the poem and look closely at very specific things like poetic structure, message and theme, imagery and feelings, and then how language is used for sound devices and figurative language. Sorry. So let's explore what it means to analyze poetry. We're going to use the SMILE strategy to analyze poetry so we can better understand the author's craft and purpose behind writing their poem. So the SMILE is an acronym for structure, message, imagery, language, and emotion. So let's start with S for structure. Really, they're just asking how is the poem organized? And we've done a lot with this. So what does the title make you think the poem is going to be about before you begin reading? And then number the stanzas and the lines. Are there rhymes? Is there a rhyme scheme? Are there repeating lines and phrases? How is punctuation used in the poem? And then finally, what type of poetry form is being used? Is it lyrical? Is it narrative? Is it free verse? That type of poetic form. All right. Then we're going to consider the message. What is the poem about? So we need to consider who is the speaker of the poem and what do we know about them. Does the speaker teach or learn a lesson through this poem, especially with the narrative? Then we're going to consider is there repetition of words or phrases and that might add meaning to the poem? And then finally, what is the message or the theme of the poem? Next, we'll move on to imagery. And you guys know a lot about imagery. What pictures do you see when you read the poem? So let's look at identifying interesting words or phrases. They could be sensory, descriptive, expressive. What did you imagine when you read those words or phrases? And if time allows, sketch out what you imagined. Next, we're going to look at language and how the author uses language. So what interesting language does the poet use? We're going to identify language used to compare things, like a simile or a metaphor, even an idiom, although we haven't really talked about that yet, but we will. We're going to identify sound devices like alliteration, repetition, assonance, and rhyme scheme. Then we're going to identify examples of figurative language, like maybe personification or hyperbole. So just look at all the language being used. We can underline it or highlight it and circle it and put our notes or labeling out to the side. And then for the last part of the SMILE strategy, we're going to consider emotion. What emotions does the speaker and or the reader feel? So what does the poem make you, the reader, feel or think about? What feelings or emotions does the speaker have in the poem? And, I should say how do, sorry, I have a typo, I'll fix that. How do the speaker's feelings change throughout the poem? So let's recap. First, I want you to read the poem for enjoyment as the author intended. Then, we're going to reread the poem, looking for specific craft used by the author that gives meaning to the poem. We're going to use the SMILE strategy to help us do this. All right, I hope you took good notes. We're going to do lots of practice with this. Hopefully you already come to me knowing about the SMILE strategy from previous grades, But we will be using it. I look forward to working with you. Thanks.